All right, so let's jump into XRP today. And of course, the biggest news in the market right now is all about Gary Gensler and what he's trying to do to get revenge. We'll break it all down for you today. It's going to be a good one. My name is Paul Barrow. Welcome back into Tech Path. I want to jump into a little bit about how all this has been architected by the SEC and how this flows into maybe crypto in general, especially what's going to happen with Ripple. Before I do that, I do want to thank our sponsor, and that is iTrust Capital. If you guys are looking to get into long-term trading and holding of your assets and you want to put it in an IRA, this is a way to do it. Check out iTrust Capital. You can actually invest into XRP. You can go into all sorts of different assets over there as well. So check out that. And of course, if you want to jump into gold and silver, you can do that as well. Click the link down below. If you do that, you get a $100 funding reward. All you have to use is our link down below. So check it out. It does help the channel. All right, so I wanted to hit on a couple things here. First up is this tweet from Eleanor Terrett. This is the Fox crypto reporter. New Judge Torres says the court will seek to schedule jury trial for the SEC Ripple case in the second calendar quarter of 2024. This is jury trial on the second part of the ruling, not the part where Ripple was deemed not a security. Torres ordered both parties to submit blackout days for trial by the 23rd. See the full deadline schedule. So that kind of was part of the process here that was going on with the courts and with the SEC. All right, so this tweet just kind of hitting on a little bit more of the potential of what might happen. This is huge in the appeal context, so long as the SEC does not attempt an interlocutory appeal or does and it is denied. So there's a couple of things that could play into this, but the key here is that would go all the way into as far out as 2025. That's what have been the scenario for most analysts right now has been saying that's going to take a long time. You know, it's a federal court, there's a process, all these things happen. All right, so here it is, the interlocutory appeal and the process. There's a couple of things in here I want to hit on. Obviously, this goes to Judge Torres. A couple of things we highlighted here, and I think it's interesting because of the urgency in which the SEC is trying to get this done. Timely appellate review is particularly warranted right now. SEC is seeking expedient and efficient ultimate resolution of this litigation. I was surprised that didn't surprise me in the sense that they would say, hey, we want to hurry this along. The question is when they want to do it. And further in the document, it says Ripple itself has accordingly proclaimed that the conclusion of the suit could take years. And then they go as far as using a Cointelegraph article for that as their submission of, here's facts. Waiting for a final judgment means that should the court appeal, reverse or remand, this court would need to redo remedies phase, discovery and litigation, any intervening trial. So this would affect a lot of what's happening with the SEC and many of their cases as well. Further into the document, they kind of go in here talking about the review is appropriate. Order involves controlling question of law as to whether there is substantial ground for a difference of opinion, meaning, hey, you could change your mind of where this might play out. And then right here is interesting. The order's rulings are of particular consequence to an issue of programmatic concern to the SEC enforcement of the securities laws and potentially to a large number of pending litigations. So Coinbase is one of them. You also see Binance Holdings also referenced and many others that are in here. So this is really it's a bad position for the SEC because first of all, they've got to get this through the judge to get it done. Whether or not the judge even would, maybe there's a possibility that the judge might allow this, but the likelihood of doing this in the time frame that the SEC wants it done is the big question mark. And I think as we go further into the document, you'll see what they're asking for. Other distributions, at least one court has already held that the crypto asset issuer used the assets to incentivize users. This is talking about the library case. And really, when you think about it, the library case, well, known already, is that these were not investment contracts, and they're already jumping to that conclusion on this. Further into this document, it says the review would advance the termination of this litigation in an efficient manner by removing the possibility of two remedy phases and two trials. So, meaning, what they're trying to do is hyperspeed this thing into the courts so they can potentially get this underway. And then last up is what really surprised me. Respectfully proposes a briefing schedule whereby the SEC files its opening brief on August 18th. That's next week. Okay. which is 2 days after the defendant's response to this letter due. Defendant's opposition is 14 days, therefore, after all these rules, September 1st of this year, and the SEC's reply is due 7 days thereafter on September 8th. So they're trying to get all of this in within 30 days. And I have not seen any of these kinds of scenarios play into, especially around a federal law case, federal law issue, is that kind of speed. So even if there is a scenario where this plays out from the judge and they say, okay, maybe I should reconsider, the likelihood, I still think the judge would push this into next year. And of course, that changes everything in a big way. Here was Deaton kind of chiming in a little bit on certain conditions right here. This is Judge Rakoff. This is the judge that was in the library case. Were gratuitous and unnecessary. He could have easily distinguished the Terra case from Ripple case, and that was something that we've talked about here on the channel. Maybe that's why he's been reversed over 50 times. Ouch. But objectively speaking, on paper, Rakoff ruling does give the SEC's request for an interlocutory appeal a bit more teeth. So there are some scenarios that play into this. We'll probably try to get Deaton on to talk about this, but this is in reality a lot of FUD that has been put into the market, and it's interesting to where this FUD is coming from. I'll talk about that in a minute. But here was Judge Torres. This is crypto law coming in again. Judge Torres and the Second Circuit will both have to agree, let me zoom in on that for you a little bit, that the SEC's arguments for why an interlocutory appeal should be allowed. So that in itself would be a lot to get that approved and agreed. So that another factor that is another kind of hurdle that you have to leap. The SEC argues that Torres' ruling could impact its other lawsuits. Of course, we know. But in this particular case, John's simply saying this is the weakest of the SEC's arguments, saying, hey, well, it's going to affect a bunch of other stuff we have going. That argument would apply every single time the SEC or any other governmental agency loses a decision. So it's kind of silly in essence. And I think that's the scenario, is this puts up the SEC in a really bad position of going at it with this kind of case. Rather than going at it with case law and all these other things, it's basically saying, hey, we think this is all happening. We've got all these other things, irons in the fire. All that plays into it to try to push in essence, bully the judge. Here's another attorney jumping in on this. Scott Chamberlain, my bet Judge Torres denies the request. She studiously avoided new law. And then, of course, the SEC failed because the undisputed facts didn't support the Howey prongs for 2 of the 3 chosen transaction buckets, not because Judge Torres shifted the legal goalposts on the definition of those prongs. So maybe that is going to be the case. And if it is, that would be a stake in the heart, because now this could be utilized by all these other cases that are out there pending, including what's happening with Binance, Coinbase, etc. And now we would have a very, very bad look on the SEC itself, because even then, the scenario of trying to get this back into trial would not have been the case. Here's Stuart Alderati. He comes in. Remember, Alderati is the attorney for Ripple. SEC does not have the right to appeal just yet, which is why they are asking permission to file this appeal. Ripple will file its response with the court next week. Stay tuned. So again, this is all pending. This is not an appeal that has been filed. This is just getting the right to appeal, which I think is the FUD that has been out there. Further into this, let's look at where Ripple and what they're doing. Hong Kong is now a high concentration, and Ripple, and we already know this, we've talked about it many times here on the show, of developers around blockchain, and a lot of new investments happening over in Hong Kong, obviously, but they're excited, Ripple being excited to work with some new businesses over there and financial institutions, which we've said many times here on the show, is that Asia is really starting to put some pressure on the Western countries moving in the right direction. You also have movement in Europe. Right here is France preparing to implement MiCA crypto regulations, and they're looking at hyper-speeding this. Look at the date here that they're trying to pull this off. The country's financial regulator, AMF, announced that it's improving registration requirements for crypto firms, which will come into effect from January 1st, 2024. So MiCA, all moving in the right direction. Hong Kong, still moving in the right direction. And you see what's happening here in the U.S. with this craziness with the SEC. So very interesting for sure. One other thing to be aware of is this headline right here. Ripple joins BIS, Cross-Border Payments Task Force. This is a big deal because when you think about the globe and you look at payments in general, cross-border payments especially, Ripple has been pretty much a leader out there. The fact that they're coming in on the BIS, look at the task force members here. I'll zoom in on this a little bit so you can kind of see some of this. But you've got PayNet, this gets into Payments Canada, Ripple, of course, SWIFT is in here, Clearinghouse is in here, the Pan-African Africa payment system is in here. So you've got a fairly significant, and then when you look at just the amount of exposure here within the BIS members, there's 63 jurisdictions in here that are ahead of this. So again, primary goal of the BIS is basically the international monetary and financial cooperation, mainly all banks and central banks communicating and working with each other. So that, again, shows the power and the strength of what Ripple is doing. And they continue to fight right here on the home front of where all this now. Does it make sense, or does it really get into a lot with where XRP is going? Maybe not. Maybe all of this right now is just political theater. And if we do get a stablecoin passing, or if we do get something going, at least on regulatory clarity for crypto in general, all of this starts to look very, very interesting in the future. Just timing here from this post from Gemini, I thought, man, this either is just by coincidence or it is a master stroke in trolling the SEC. And this is, of course, Gemini launching. XRP is now available for deposit on Gemini. So I don't know. Sometimes I think the Winklevoss twins are, they have that about them that kind of goes in that direction. Anyway, if you guys are part of our Diamond Circle, congrats. But if you're not, make sure and jump in. It's a great place where you get additional podcasts. We also do a lot of additional research, TA, all that kind of stuff. You can catch it over on the Diamond Circle. It's free, and it's a great place to sign up. Just click the link down below. If you guys want to catch me, it is out there on Twitter, @Paul Barrett. We'll catch you next time right here on TechPath.